The life expectancy of an African American male is somewhere around 70 years, which means I'm definitely on the back nine. This vlog will be a record of my journey to relearn fatherhood on the back nine. My family was scheduled to drive to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And with the lease on my car being up this month, I used this as an opportunity to go on an adventure. I'd been wanting to make the switch to electric, but everyone was telling me that it would be dangerous to take an EV on a long trip across country. So, I decided to test the theory. My first thought was to stay with Mercedes, but the price was just too high. And then I looked at this Kia, but I just didn't like the looks. And I looked at several other options, and ultimately I kept fearing the newness of these cars. Most of them were new to the market this year, and I'm very leery of being the first at something. So I went with the company and the car that's been around for a little while, a Tesla Model Y. The first thing I noticed about this car as we packed for our trip was how much storage space there was. In addition to the trunk, there's this underneath the trunk section that offers additional storage. And then because there's no engine, there's also this front trunk they call a frunk. But overall, we were just amazed at how much space there was for our stuff. Once we were all packed up, I entered the destination into the car's computer. And what I love about this computer is that it's not just navigation where it's going to tell you what route you'll need to take. It's also going to calculate all your charging needs for you. So this thing's going to tell you when and where you'll need to stop, how much battery you'll have when you get there, and how long you'll need to charge in order to safely get to your next stop on the journey. So bright and early, we got rolling on our trip, and one of the first things I felt driving this car on the highway is just how quiet it is. We left early in the morning with the hopes that baby Ella would sleep, and it was clear to me very early that everyone was going to join in. And 2 hours or so into our journey, we had our first stop. It was a Sheetz in West Virginia. Now when you stop, the car will tell you how long you need to stay there in order to safely get to your next stop. It doesn't actually make you charge the car all the way up. It literally just gets enough charge to get to the next stop. Another couple hours go by, and then it's time for another stop.
Now turn left onto Robert C. Byrd Drive.
The car really dictates for you where and when this will happen. You don't have to give it much thought. The second stop was another Sheetz. Now, I'll be honest, I was a little frustrated about that. At both of our stops, the only option we had was Sheetz. That's not my idea of a great breakfast, so the selections and locations for their charging stations was my first complaint. Our next stop was a little better. It was a charging station in the middle of a shopping center, and so there were several eating options within walking distance. As we drove through North Carolina, we went through this town. It was one of those towns that almost makes you feel like you're going back in time, because the town feels so old school and sort of lacking in technology. And so I did a search and found that if I needed a charge when I was in this town, the nearest charge would be 17 miles away. And I did think to myself as we rolled by gas station after gas station, I'm not sure I would want an electric car if I lived right here. But eventually, we made it to South Carolina, and it didn't take long for us to be in Myrtle Beach.
Now turn left onto North Ocean Boulevard.
All Baby Ella needed was to see sand. That's when it's official. The Brock family is on vacation. So we did it, we're back. 24 hours of driving a Tesla, 12 hours down and 12 hours back from Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Pittsburgh, all the way to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina and back. Plus a week of driving in Myrtle Beach. This was essentially my first experience driving an EV. Obviously my first Tesla as well, and so I thought I would do this video and give you all my thoughts on what the experience was like. The first thing I would say is that charging is a lot simpler than you think it is. We never really had to look for where we would get a charge, ever. At no point during the trip did we ever worry about running out of battery. We were never close to running out of battery. It was just not an issue at all. So that's one thing. It's also very, very feasible to get free charging. So I didn't know that at first, but when we were in Myrtle Beach, it only took me a day or two to figure out that, you know, lots of hotels and businesses in metropolitan areas have charge stations just kind of as a service to their customers. So every day in Myrtle Beach, other than the first couple of days when I didn't know to look, I was able to secure a free charge, which is gonna, you know, it's gonna save you some money. Autopilot is an absolute game changer. A long drive, I mean, 12 hours behind the wheel is taxing on someone, and so having the car do a strong amount of the driving was a big deal. On the way down to Myrtle Beach, I was towing a bike, and so the autopilot settings didn't work, and that's a bummer. The fact that, so Tesla, if you can hear me, the fact that the autopilot features don't work when I'm towing my bike was a little bit of a bummer, but I do understand why that's the case. The bike blocks some of the cameras, so the car doesn't really know where it is in space, and so it makes a lot of sense that it doesn't work. It's just a bummer. But having autopilot was an absolute game changer. After 12 hours driving in this car, I didn't feel even as fatigued as I've felt on a 5 or 6 hour car ride. So the autopilot does absolutely make a big difference. So there's that. And the overall performance of the car is just absolutely amazing. If you're not used to the kind of instant power that comes with a battery rather than kind of an engine that has to kind of rev up and get itself going, it's pretty jarring when you really push on the accelerator. This car goes, and so it is actually nice knowing that you have that kind of power, because, you know, at least for me, thinking that I'm in an electric car and how's it going to compete with the traffic, that's just not an issue at all. So those are the great things about the experience. There are some downsides that I wanted to make sure I mention. There's no CarPlay. My understanding is that the same is true of Apple's CarPlay. I don't know what y'all know and Apple people do, but my understanding is that Tesla doesn't play with anybody well. So my phone doesn't talk to the car in the way that I'm used to, and that can be very, very frustrating for someone who's used to accessing their messages, their music, all that stuff in the car. It doesn't work nearly as well as what you're used to. So there's that. Also, this computer, which is essentially the heart and soul of this car, it isn't as user-friendly as I would wish it was. It's not laid out in a way that's super intuitive. Once you get to understand the system, you'll recognize, oh wow, this is actually quite intuitive, but it's not what you're expecting. And so it's oftentimes hard for me to find different functions. So for example, if you ask me to get something out of my glove compartment, it's going to take me like 3 minutes because I got to remember how to get to it. You can't just push the button and open the glove compartment. So that can be a little frustrating. And so if you're like me, who's into routines, having to change all of your routines is a little bit frustrating. So thanks a lot, Tesla. And also, you know, it's not a Mercedes. And what I mean by that is that was my last car. And so the thing that I often feel when I get in this car is it's like a different experience. My Mercedes is very pretty, and it was very smooth. And I don't believe that this car is nearly as pretty either outside or in. And so if that's what you go for in a car, this might not, particularly the Model Y, might not be for you. I think the S is kind of pretty, but other than that, Teslas just kind of look like Teslas to me. And it's also not the smooth ride that I'm used to in my E350. And so if you're coming from a luxury vehicle perspective and you've got those like super smooth riding cars like a Lexus or Mercedes, you may be disappointed in this from a ride perspective. But what I would say is after a week of driving this car, I came back and I got in my Mercedes because it's still here until the end of the month. And within 5 minutes, I wanted to be back in my Tesla. That's the truth. Because it's a utility thing. The way that this car works, it's like there's another person helping to plan your whole trip. This car is all about utility. It's all about getting you there most efficiently. It's all about saving energy, time, money. And when you think of it that way, and you let go of the other way of thinking, my other car was really about, it's pretty. I like it because it's pretty. But once you let go of that and you think about utility, there's just no comparison. So that's my assessment of the Tesla Model Y and the electric car experience in general. Hope you appreciate it. Hope you appreciate all the other videos that I do here on this channel. Please subscribe, like, share, do whatever you can to help kind of spread the message about what we do here on this channel. I try to make positive, lighthearted, sort of fun content. Hope you like it. See you soon.